The night was silent, but Rex, the police dog, refused to stay quiet. His barking grew louder and louder behind an abandoned warehouse, pulling officers toward a corner everyone else would have ignored. At first, it looked like nothing but shadows and broken crates. But then the ground told a different story. Hidden beneath the dirt, behind walls no one had touched for years, lay a secret that froze every officer in their tracks. And what they uncovered next left the entire block stunned. Here's the full story, but before we continue, drop the name of your favorite dog in the comments and make sure you've subscribed. Because what's coming next, trust me, you don't want to be the one who misses it. The evening had slipped into darkness and the warehouse district lay quiet. Almost too quiet for a place that once thrived with delivery trucks and restless workers. Rows of old brick warehouses stood like forgotten guardians of a past industrial era, their broken windows reflecting faint glimmers of light from nearby street lamps. The sound of dripping water from rusted pipes echoed in the distance, adding to the unnerving silence that hung in the air. It was in this silence that a K-9 unit had been dispatched. Patrol had noticed unusual activity in the area over the last few nights. Strange movements, shadows darting across the alleyways, reports of trucks pulling in after midnight and leaving before dawn, and even faint noises that nearby residents could not explain. It was a part of town where people kept their heads low and their mouths shut, but this time one witness had whispered just enough to raise suspicion. Something was happening inside or behind one of those warehouses, something people were too afraid to confront. The K-9 team arrived with their trusted partner, a German shepherd named Rex. Known for his sharp instincts, Rex had proven his worth countless times before. His handler knew that when Rex locked onto something, there was always more to uncover. Tonight was no different. As soon as they approached the rows of abandoned buildings, Rex grew alert. His ears stood stiff, his body tense. The faint glow of the flashlight caught his eyes, sharp and unblinking, as if he already sensed something was waiting in the darkness. Then, as they moved closer, Rex suddenly pulled hard on the leash, leading them behind one particular warehouse. There it was, the barking began. At first low and steady, then more urgent, more insistent. Rex was not just barking at shadows. His body pressed forward, paws digging into the gravel as he strained toward a specific corner cloaked in darkness. It was a spot most would walk past without a second glance, hidden between rusted barrels and a collapsing wooden pallet. To anyone else, it was just a forgotten corner of an old warehouse. But to Rex, it was something more, something alive, something hidden. The officers exchanged glances, unsure what exactly had caught his attention. Was it a person hiding? Evidence dumped away from prying eyes? Or something far worse? The uncertainty made the silence around them feel heavier. Only Rex's continuous barking filled the air, a sound that seemed to echo against the cold brick walls like a warning. They scanned the corner with their flashlights. Nothing obvious appeared, just shadows stacked upon shadows. Yet Rex refused to move. His growl rumbled low, his stance unwavering, his eyes locked. The dog's determination unsettled even the most experienced among them. The question hung unspoken. What was in that corner? The team began clearing debris around the spot. The broken wood creaked as it shifted. The rusted barrels rattled when pushed aside. Each sound seemed louder than it should have been, bouncing through the stillness of the night. Every second stretched into something tense, as though the corner itself was guarding a secret it did not want revealed. But the more they moved, the stronger Rex's reaction became. His barks grew sharper, his body inching closer, as if he was ready to dive straight into the darkness if given the chance. This was no false alarm. Whatever was there had to be significant. The officers slowed, sensing the weight of the moment. Darkness seemed to press closer around them. The flashlight beam flickered against the crumbling wall, exposing stains they could not immediately explain. The ground beneath them felt disturbed, as though it had been shifted or dug at some point. And in that realization, questions multiplied. Was someone hiding something here deliberately? Had this place been used for more than just storage? As the air grew colder, Rex's handler tightened his grip, steadying both himself and the dog. The barking became rhythmic, a steady beat of urgency. Every sound seemed to point to a truth buried beneath the silence of that corner. Then, for a brief moment, a faint noise stirred from within the shadows. A sound so subtle that it might have been overlooked had Rex not reacted instantly. His barking reached a peak, echoing through the deserted warehouse yard. The noise did not sound mechanical. It did not sound like the creak of wood or the shifting of metal. It was different, a noise that seemed too deliberate, too alive. The handlers froze. Could it be a person? If so, who would choose to hide behind a warehouse in the dead of night, away from everyone's sight? Or was it something else entirely, something that could connect to the unexplained reports of late-night trucks and whispered suspicions of illegal activity in the area? Each question only deepened the unease. The officers decided to widen the search, moving slowly along the perimeter. They scanned every inch of the warehouse wall. Marks appeared on the bricks, faint but noticeable scratches, as though something had been dragged or forced against it. The wooden pallet bore similar signs, as though it had been moved repeatedly, not left to rot like the others. Rex pulled harder. His nose was working furiously, sniffing the ground, circling the corner, then returning to the same exact spot. Again and again, his insistence left no room for doubt. Something was hidden there, something that would not remain in the shadows for much longer. The night deepened, and so did the tension. Every step closer to the corner felt like a step deeper into the unknown. The darkness behind the warehouse no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. It felt as though something was waiting to be discovered, and Rex was the only one with the courage to demand it. The officers regrouped. They had to move cautiously. Whatever was in the corner might not simply be an object left behind. It could be evidence of a crime. It could be someone desperate to stay hidden. Or it could be the missing piece of a larger mystery that had been unfolding without their knowledge. Rex barked again, his eyes burning into the darkness. The sound carried through the stillness like an alarm bell that refused to be silenced. Each bark was a message, a warning that whatever lay in that corner was more than anyone wanted to believe. The warehouse loomed above them, its towering walls sealing the moment with an eerie weight. Behind it, the truth waited, concealed in shadows that had endured for too long. And at the center of it all was Rex, the dog who would not be ignored, who would not let the secret remain hidden. The corner was no longer just a patch of darkness. It had become a threshold between silence and revelation, between the ordinary and the shocking truth that waited to surface. The officers steadied themselves. The search was no longer routine. It was the beginning of something far bigger, something that connected whispers of the past to the urgency of the present. And Rex, with his unyielding stance, was about to drag them all across that threshold into a mystery they could not yet see, but could feel pressing down on them with every passing second. The first clue was about to surface, and nothing from that moment on would feel the same. The night pressed down heavier as the officers steadied their flashlights and tools. What had begun as a standard patrol had now turned into something no one expected. The barking of Rex was relentless, echoing through the warehouse lot like a drumbeat of warning. Each bark, sharp and commanding, told them there was no turning back. The corner had a secret, and the dog had sworn not to let it remain hidden. The handlers cleared away the last of the wooden planks stacked against the wall. Dust rose in the air, clouding their vision, but beneath the debris the ground looked disturbed. The soil there was uneven compared to the rest of the warehouse yard. Small patches were darker, looser, as though someone had recently tampered with it. Rex's nose pressed close, sniffing deep into the dirt, circling, pawing with urgency. He lowered his head and growled, the sound vibrating low and steady, like the hum of a storm building. Then he pawed again, more forcefully this time, sending chunks of loose soil scattering. The officers stopped. This was no coincidence. The ground had been worked over, shifted, dug, covered again. The obvious question clawed at their thoughts. What had been buried here and why? They began carefully digging with their own tools, shoveling away in silence except for the sound of metal scraping against earth. Each scoop revealed soil that smelled damp, raw, and unsettled. Rex stayed close, hovering over the site, barking sharply whenever the digging slowed, as though urging them forward. After several minutes, the shovel hit something harder than soil. The sound sent a chill up their spines. A hollow thud echoed beneath their feet. Everyone froze. The beam of the flashlight caught the glint of something metallic. The soil fell away slowly, revealing the outline of a rusted steel container, wedged deep into the ground. The container was no bigger than a suitcase, dented and worn by years of weathering, but its placement raised questions that multiplied with each passing second. Why bury it here? Why behind a warehouse that seemed abandoned, but still carried whispers of recent activity? The officers exchanged tense glances. They did not open it immediately. Instead, they noted everything carefully, treating the site like a crime scene. Photographs were taken, the disturbed soil documented. Yet even with protocol, there was a sense of urgency that no procedure could dull. Rex would not back away. His eyes stayed locked on the container as though he already knew what it carried. He barked again, sharp and unyielding, and the sound bounced against the warehouse walls like a call no one could ignore. When they finally pried the lid open, a stale odor seeped out. Inside, the flashlight beam revealed not cash, not drugs, but stacks of old papers, sealed plastic bags, and a few small boxes. The papers appeared damp, edges eaten away by time, but they were covered with markings, names, numbers, and coded notes. The smaller boxes contained strange trinkets, like metal tags and pieces of old identification cards. Some snapped in half as though meant to be destroyed. The mystery thickened. Who would go to the trouble of burying documents here? What connection did they have to the warehouse itself, or the unusual reports of late-night movement? Was this evidence of crimes long forgotten, or the key to something still ongoing? The officers spread the contents on a tarp under the dim flashlight beams. The papers, though damaged, bore signs of careful planning, ledgers of deliveries, addresses scattered across the city, and notes written in shorthand. At first glance, they appeared old, but the disturbing part was that some documents were newer, recent enough to suggest activity within the last year. Rex sniffed each piece, circling the pile, barking at one particular stack of papers. The pages contained names alongside numbers, amounts of money, perhaps, or coded transactions. Some of the names were underlined while others were crossed out. The more they read, the clearer it became. This was not just random clutter. It was a record, an account of something organized, concealed, and possibly still active. One officer pointed out something chilling. The warehouse where they stood was not abandoned in the official records. On paper, it still belonged to a shell company that operated under a different name. The ownership had shifted hands multiple times, each change more suspicious than the last. Yet no real business had been seen operating there for years. So why was someone using it at night? And what was hidden deeper inside the warehouse walls if this much had already been found outside? Rex growled again and turned toward the door of the warehouse itself. His sudden shift of focus caught everyone off guard. He barked fiercely, pulling hard on the leash, dragging his handler toward the door that hung crookedly on its hinges. The dog's urgency was unmistakable. If the corner had revealed one secret, the warehouse held more. The officers prepared themselves. The rusted lock had long since been broken, and the door creaked open under a firm push. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The beam of the flashlight illuminated stacks of broken crates, cobwebs draped across the corners, and walls stained from years of neglect. But under the dust, subtle tracks stood out. Marks of movement, faint impressions on the ground where crates had been shifted. The warehouse was not as abandoned as it seemed. Rex sniffed furiously, weaving between the crates, pausing to bark at certain spots. His body language screamed urgency. He led them deeper inside, toward the far end of the warehouse, where the shadows thickened into near blackness. The officers followed carefully, every step crunching against broken glass and gravel. The silence inside was oppressive, broken only by Rex's bark echoing against the steel roof above. And then, faintly, they heard it again, the noise, a sound that had first stirred in the corner outside, only this time it was clearer, a soft shuffle, a rustle. Something or someone was here. Flashlights darted across the room. Between two large crates stacked high, a small opening appeared. It looked almost intentional, a gap wide enough for someone to slip through. The air drifting from it felt colder, fresher, as though it led somewhere beyond the walls. Rex charged forward, barking furiously at the gap. His paws clawed at the ground, his body pressed low, ready to squeeze through. The officers steadied themselves, scanning the area with sharper focus. Behind those crates, beyond that gap, lay the next piece of the mystery. Was it a hidden passage, a concealed storage, or someone waiting in the shadows, listening to every movement? Every possibility carried danger. The officers carefully shifted the crates aside, revealing a narrow passage built into the warehouse wall. It sloped downward, reinforced with old wooden beams. The smell of earth and rust poured out, mingling with something sharper, an odor they could not yet identify but which Rex reacted to instantly. His barking became urgent, desperate, as though whatever was down there could not wait another second. The discovery of the buried container had been unsettling enough. But this hidden passage was something far larger. It explained the strange movements at night, the trucks that came and went without explanation, the whispers of locals too afraid to speak. The passage led deeper into the unknown, and as Rex strained toward it, barking endlessly into the darkness below, it became clear. The corner had been only the beginning. The true secret was buried deeper, waiting in the dark. The narrow passage yawned before them, the stale air rolling upward like a warning. Wooden beams reinforced its walls, old but still sturdy, and a set of rough steps descended into the shadows. The officers hesitated, scanning the darkness with their flashlights, but Rex was already lunging forward, his bark echoing into the hollow space below. He would not allow them to stop now. The handler steadied his grip and gave the signal. They began to move down into the passage, their boots scraping against the dirt as they descended. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of their throats. The silence pressed heavier with each step, broken only by Rex's low growls. At the bottom, the passage opened into a hidden chamber. The flashlight beams swept across the room, and what they revealed sent shivers up every spine. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, some neatly packed, others torn open. Papers spilled across the floor, mixed with broken equipment and discarded clothing. There were rows of old filing cabinets, their drawers stuffed with documents and envelopes, and against the far wall, a row of small cages stood, empty but stained with signs of past use. The buried container outside had been only a fragment. This was the heart of it. Rex barked furiously at the cages, circling them, his body rigid with unease. He pressed his nose against one, sniffing deeply before stepping back and barking again, louder this time. The evidence was undeniable. Those cages had not always been empty. Something had been kept here, hidden from the world above. The officers spread out, documenting everything. Each box revealed more clues, ledgers, receipts, and maps showing distribution routes across the city. The papers matched the coded notes they had found earlier. Some crates contained medicines, syringes, and unmarked bottles. Others carried tools, chains, and tarps. And then came the detail that froze them in place. Among the scattered papers were records not just of shipments and payments, but of names. Dozens of names listed alongside dates and conditions. At first it seemed confusing, but then the pattern emerged. The names matched missing persons reports that had gone unsolved in the city over the last few years. The chilling truth settled in. This warehouse had been more than a hiding place for smuggled goods. It had been part of something larger, something darker. Rex's barking drew them further in. He stood at the far side of the chamber, pawing at another section of wall. Unlike the rest of the room, this part looked patched, covered with newer boards. The officers forced them open, revealing yet another tunnel, narrower, winding deeper underground. The sound of dripping water echoed faintly from within, along with a soft rustle that made every muscle tense. With no choice but to follow Rex's lead, they pressed on. The tunnel twisted and turned until it led to a small underground alcove. Inside, the beam of the flashlight caught movement. A figure crouched against the wall, shielding their face from the sudden light. It was not an attacker. It was not a criminal. It was a young boy, no older than 12, trembling, his clothes torn and dirty, eyes wide with fear. For a moment, the world went silent. The entire mystery snapped into focus. The barking at the corner, the buried documents, the secret passage, the cages, it all connected to this moment. Rex rushed forward, not aggressively but gently, as though he understood before anyone else. He lowered his body, tail wagging cautiously, pressing his head against the boy's arm. The boy flinched at first, but then his trembling eased. His small hands reached out, clutching the dog's fur, holding on as if Rex was the first sign of safety he had felt in a long time. The officers moved carefully, lowering their flashlights to avoid frightening him further. The boy was weak, dehydrated, but alive, and in his frightened eyes they saw a story too heavy for his age. The truth of the warehouse was now undeniable. It was a front, a hub where children and vulnerable people had been taken, hidden away, and moved like pieces on a ledger. The buried container of documents had been records of transactions, attempts to erase trails, while the underground chamber revealed the scale of it. And the boy. He was proof that the operation was not just a thing of the past. It was still active. But now it was unraveling. Rex barked once more, this time not with urgency, but with finality. His instinct had led them through every step past the dark corner, past the buried lies, down to the truth that mattered most. The boy was carried out of the tunnel into the night air. He clung to Rex the entire way, refusing to let go. And as the first rays of dawn broke over the warehouse district, the weight of the night began to lift. The once silent street filled with the sounds of backup arriving, ambulances, and the hum of radios as the scene was secured. Investigations over the following days revealed even more. The names in the documents linked to a long-running network that had operated in the shadows for years, using forgotten warehouses as their base. The recovered records gave authorities leads strong enough to dismantle the entire operation. Families who had been left without answers finally began receiving them. But for all the work done by human hands, it was Rex who had been the key. Without his refusal to move from that dark corner, without his relentless barking and unshakable focus, the secret beneath the warehouse would have remained buried. The boy, once silent and broken, slowly found his voice again. And the first name he spoke was not of the officers, not of the city, but of the dog who had found him. He called out softly, clinging to Rex with the kind of bond that could never be explained, only felt. In the weeks that followed, the warehouse district changed. The shadows that once carried whispers of fear were replaced by the hum of renewal. The warehouse itself was sealed, its tunnels collapsed, its dark past put to rest. And Rex, he was honored in front of the city. His courage recognized not just as a K-9 officer, but as the reason lives were restored. His handler knew the truth deeply. Machines could detect, people could investigate, but only a dog's instinct, pure and unwavering, could cut through the silence of lies and lead straight to the hidden heart of the matter. The mystery that began with a bark in the shadows ended with light breaking through the darkness. Families were reunited, hope was restored, and a city was reminded of the power of loyalty, instinct, and the bond between human and dog. And the boy, safe now, with a future ahead, never forgot the sound of Rex's bark, the very sound that had shattered the silence of his captivity and replaced it with freedom. The secret behind the warehouse had been revealed. The darkness had been broken, and it ended not with fear but with life. If you like these kind of stories, we upload them every day. Don't miss it when it drops. Hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure you're here first when the next mystery unfolds.